What's up, everybody? You have questions about leaving your home country, traveling full-time, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 4-stage process and how to do just that. My name is Nicholas Demski from the Single Dad Nomad, and on this channel, we talk about living better worldwide. So if you're interested in videos like that, consider subscribing. All right, everybody, my name is Nicholas Demski, and this is episode 2 of the Live Better Worldwide podcast. Today, we're talking about the questions that people have when leaving their hometown and traveling full-time. Now, I know it's not easy for everybody because if you grow up in one area, you got friends, you got family, you got routines, and so obviously you've seen people, maybe other YouTube channels, showing you travels around the world and what it's like to travel full-time. So obviously you have questions about how to do that. You're interested. Let's get right into it in this episode. The first thing that we're going to talk about in the 4-stage process to leaving your hometown and traveling full-time is the education stage. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. Yes, that's probably pretty obvious, but you have to educate yourself about travel first, and that's why you're here, of course. One of the first things you need to educate yourself on is how you need to change your mindset. Now, for many Americans like myself, we grow up believing that travel is only for the super rich people. You have to have millions and millions of dollars. That's the only way you can travel, because the only form of travel that we are familiar with is a week vacation in Cancun or 2 weeks on a cruise to the Bahamas, something like that. Those are the only types of travel options that we really hear about in the United States. So of course, it's obvious that many Americans believe that only the super rich can travel. That's all they see. So, obviously, welcome to this show, welcome to this channel. I'm teaching you something a little bit different. It's not for only the super rich, and we will get a little bit more into that later, but I am not super rich. You can see, my hat's got Benz in it. I got a hoodie on that I stole from my dad, so I'm not super rich by any means, and I still get to travel full time. Another thing that you have to change in your mindset is that travel is dangerous. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that if you go traveling, you're never going to encounter anything that can go wrong in your life. That's not true. That will never be true. That's not how life is. But travel is not dangerous. People will say that you're going to get kidnapped, you're going to get murdered, you're going to lose your children, you're going to get robbed and lose everything you have and be left out in the middle of a jungle somewhere. Because those are the stories you hear on the news, right? Of someone who gets killed in their Airbnb and stuffed in a dumpster or something. Well, I'm sure Airbnb would have something to say about that, because millions and millions and millions and millions of transactions have happened via that program in other countries, and people always come out alive, like me. I've Airbnb'd all over the world, never had a single problem that, wasn't typical of any apartment you might rent. So not a big deal. It's not that dangerous to travel. Now, of course, you might be worrying about death, injury, illness, safety, security, and I'm not under any illusions that the world is 100% safe. But I hope you're not under the illusion also that your current lifestyle is 100% safe. If you think that travel is dangerous, but that your current lifestyle is somehow, bubble wrap around you that will keep you safe for the rest of your life, that's an illusion, definitely. And so I'm not going to tell you that traveling is going to kill you or not kill you, or that staying home will kill you or not kill you. It's life. You might get sick and die at home. You might get sick and die while you're traveling. That's just life. Don't assume that staying home or traveling is more dangerous. They're the same. And in fact, there are lots of ways to make sure that you are healthy and ready to go for world travel. There are some diseases that you might want to get vaccinations for, like typhoid and things like that. Maybe you have some malaria medicine if you're traveling to places where that could be a problem. But what I've found is that hospitals are really solid worldwide. And of course, a lot of the doctors that you will find are also English-speaking professionals. So you're not going to get stuck somewhere needing a surgery and not able to communicate with the doctor. That's very unlikely. It's been way too long, I've been building walls around me. Keep my distance. Another one of the things that people believe when they hear about long-term traveling or full-time traveling is that they're going to get stuck in another country. I've heard other people say this. What if you get stuck there? What if you get trapped in that country? Well, that's not really going to happen unless you go to like North Korea or, some other country and commit a serious crime that ends you up in prison. you're just not going to get stuck there. I was down in Colombia for their quarantine, and it was a very strict quarantine, especially compared to the United States. And they still had repatriation flights. And so I was able to get out of the country, even under one of the most strict quarantines in the world, in my opinion. So you're not going to get stuck, and you can always come home whenever you want. A lot of people think full-time traveling is, I'm stuck traveling 24/7 for the rest of my life. No, you can come home whenever you want. You get sick of it next week, come on home. You get sick of it next year, come on home. You're still welcome back to your home country, as long as you don't, get rid of your residency or citizenship there.
As long as we're together, we'll make it through this.
And I know people can be afraid of, taking long flights, but I can tell you, after going through several 16-hour flights between Chicago and Hong Kong, it's like a 4-hour flight, an 8-hour flight is like taking a taxi ride at this point. It's just nothing. It's not even difficult. It's hopping on a plane, boom, you're in another country by the end of the day. It's not that difficult. I know in the beginning, when you first start taking flights, they seem long, they seem cramped, they seem crowded. My first long flight was in 2011 from Chicago to San Jose, Costa Rica. And it was like a 6-hour flight, maybe something like that. And I remember thinking it was just devastating how long it was and how cramped I was. And I couldn't believe it that I was doing that. Now, like I said, after multiple 16-hour flights, a flight from the United States to South America is just a walk in the park. I barely even notice it.
Would you come to my party if I had one in the lobby?
The last part of educating yourself before you start traveling full-time is that I want you to realize that nothing will be how you think it will be. You could sit here and listen to me for years talk about traveling, and anything I say is not going to be exactly what you discover for yourself. It will be a vague representation of what you thought before encountering it, but the media just doesn't provide what you're going to see, hear, smell, taste, and experience. It just gives glimpses, and sometimes they are intentionally misrepresented in order to boost tourism to that area. Most of the time, the misrepresentations are just manifestations of our bodies being infinitely better at perceiving stimuli than any iPhone capture. So if you're ready to experience travel without the buffer of a screen in front of you, it's time to start the preparatory stage of leaving your home country and traveling full time. Let's get into it.
I'm telling you, it's my time to rise up, live the life I'm proud of. So I woke up.
So the preparatory stage of traveling full time. Making a decision can be fun, a lot of fun, especially if you're planning your trip and where you want to go and you're thinking about the climate and the food and the culture and the people. It can be a lot of fun to fantasize about these types of things. But it can also be really time consuming and incredibly strenuous if you over plan. I've done that many times, so I hope that this section right here will help you get prepared without over planning or stressing yourself out or wasting too much time.
Trying to get a deal, trying to get a meal, hungry on the beat, hungry so I eat.
So during the preparatory stage, you have to think about your money. Now, before traveling full-time, I would definitely recommend that you have some savings built up, at least 3 months of expenses after landing. And there are some countries where you could live for like $500-$600 a month. So I'd say if you have at least $1,500 saved up, ready to go as a cushion for you whenever you start traveling, that would probably make you feel a little bit better about wherever you're going. You don't want to land somewhere and be instantly broke and have to start immediately looking for a job if you discover that you don't even like living in that area, or it's, there's just something about it that you don't like. You don't want to be trapped. So have a little bit of savings, at least $1,500 in your bank account for 3 months cushion. But obviously, if you can have more than that, it would be awesome for you. However, there are ways to make money while traveling, thankfully. So you could very well just go somewhere, be broke, and start a job like that and be ready to go, no problem.
Do you keep an ass on your chest? Do you think somebody will rescue you? Yeah.
Some of the ways that I would recommend doing that would be working abroad in seasonal jobs. You might want to look into summer camps in other countries. You could look into getting your scuba certification if you know how to be a surf instructor or a free diving instructor, or you know how to kite surf, something in the water. Any kind of instructor could get a job anywhere like that. You could also work on a cruise line, and it's a good way to travel the world and get to meet a lot of people. And you don't have to worry about your transportation because you're on a giant boat. Another thing you can do is find more local style jobs that are less seasonal. So for example, there are a lot of teaching English jobs abroad that you can find whenever you land somewhere. If you have a teaching certificate, you could basically take that teaching certificate anywhere and teach your subject matter in another country. You could get into bartending. You could work in a scuba diving shop. There are even some countries like Cambodia where you can really easily apply for a business visa and just set up whatever business you want, whether it be, helping people move to that country or your own little taco stand that you push around from corner to corner. So there are a lot of options for making income while you travel full time. And that's why I recommend having online income if you can do it. And I really think you can. You just have to put in the effort. It takes a long time. It's a new skill to learn. But just a few options for you real quick. You could get into writing, like I have, photography. You could sell pictures, videography. I've made and sold videos. Basically any kind of client service like that you can make money off of online. You could get into being a VA. That's a virtual assistant, so helping people with their schedules or contacting people, just whatever they need. I know there's a lot of people who do that. I'll talk about it more on this channel later on, but real quick, I just want to say that it takes time to generate money in a new way. If you've spent your whole life through the American education system, for example, the only way you know how to make money is by going out and getting a job and working for someone else. You don't have to do that if you work online. You can create your own business, create your own income, and it might take a couple years to get it going, but remember, if you do it for 30, 40 years, you can basically have a retirement package doing what you love, without having to rely on some other employer or something like that. Even if you suck at it, you could probably do really well in 40 years as long as you stayed focused and just kept grinding.
Let's run away to far away places.
The second part of the preparatory stage is that you need your passport, and I want you to do this early. Get your passport early because it takes time to process. The sooner you get it done, the less stressful it's going to be and the less expensive it's going to be. And right now during the coronavirus pandemic, they're a little bit slower in their passport centers, although they're starting to open up now. So set an appointment to get your passport. You might be able to do it at your local post office or at the nearest passport agency. The one I would go to is in Detroit, for example. And I'll actually give you a link down in the description box so you can find the nearest passport center near you. It would also tell you more about the current processing times. And don't forget that everyone in your family must have a passport. So if you have kids, they also have to have a passport. Get on it right now if you're planning on traveling in a few months.
Sun is bright, it's a new day and night.
The third part of the preparatory stage is decluttering. Now, this is something that I'm advocating, but also still working on. I have way too much stuff back here in the United States, and I continue to pare down. I keep trying to sell stuff and get rid of it. But, if you're an American, you just spend your life collecting a bunch of crap. And so we need to declutter this crap. You can't travel with a storage unit full of junk that you're never going to use. Now, obviously, you can, because it's in storage, but one, you're paying for it, and two, it creates a mental backpack that you carry around with you everywhere. So if you're traveling the world, but you constantly have to think about the storage unit that you have back home that, has valuables in it, maybe a vehicle, maybe a whole bunch of instruments or electronics or something, it would have just been easier to sell all that stuff before you left, and then you just don't have to think about it anymore. And all that extra money goes into your pocket instead of into a storage unit every month. So you really have to balance out your liabilities and assets. And I would just recommend getting rid of all of your liabilities and building up your assets as much as you can, especially since you can't travel with that stuff anyway. And you also, during this decluttering stage, need to switch your mindset a little bit into only purchasing needs. Now, this is really difficult because we could say, hey, I need this today to feel good. Well, that's not a need, that's a want. Okay, we need to focus on our needs. So for example, I haven't even bought sandals in like 2 years because I have a pair of boots. Now, I was wearing my boots in between the very hot and humid climates of Mexico and Colombia. Now, why would I do that? Wear these giant winter boots, not winter boots, but like my stomping boots that I wear around out in Michigan and stuff. And why would I wear them in these super hot climates? Because I don't need sandals. I would love to have sandals. They're much more comfortable. They're much more convenient. You don't have to put on socks, etc. But I don't need sandals. I need one pair of shoes. That's my boots. And that's it. Okay, I would love to have sandals. They're easy to afford, $5 at a gas station. It's not that expensive. But I don't need them. So I'm not going to make a $5 want purchase when I'm trying to travel full time. I need to balance those wants and those needs. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with a backpack full of crap that I don't actually need and I just wanted. And now I can't travel as well.
First night of the rest of our lives, and there's a
The next part of the preparatory stage is deciding where to go. And this is a hard one because the world is gigantic. You could just spin a globe and throw a dart at it and end up in the middle of the ocean. But I really think that the biggest part of where you want to go, you need to realize is that wherever you go is going to end up being a part of who you are. That is, your climate and your geography becomes an aspect of your being and your personality. So for example, if you live in a hovel in an inner city, you might be constantly stressed and have a lot of artificial noises around you that either keep you awake at night or maybe stress you out during the day. Now compare that to living on an island countryside in Thailand where you have your own little house and all you hear is birds every morning and you can go out to the ocean and have really fresh food. Your environment is a part of who you are. If you are living in a hovel compared to living on the ocean beach, then half of your life is either a hovel or an ocean beach, which means you are either a hovel or an ocean beach. So where you go is really important because it's going to become a part of who you are. And you can always change wherever you are to, explore more versions of yourself. But deciding where to go isn't easy. And I get that. And it's going to take time to find a place that really suits you and becomes a solid part of who you are as opposed to something that is a little bit discombobulating. One thing you might want to think about other than the climate and geography of where you're going to go is the cost of living there. You don't want to move out of your own country to go live somewhere that has a higher cost of living or even an equivalent cost of living. Most likely, you want to find somewhere to reduce your cost of living. So just make sure you're keeping an eye on that. If you're from the United States, don't plan on going anywhere else in the Western world. You're not going to be able to save money. You got to start thinking South America, Central America, Asia, maybe some parts of the Middle East or Africa. The world is huge, so cost of living is going to be key for you. Make sure you have some idea of what you're looking at. The next thing that you need to think about is the culture and the customs and laws. So for example, if you really, really like to drink alcohol, you better not go to a country where alcohol is banned. You could end up getting in a lot of trouble for drinking in the wrong place. I remember a story about a lady who had a drink on a flight, landed in some Middle Eastern country that bans alcohol, maybe Saudi Arabia or something like that, and because she had drank alcohol on the flight, she got arrested in the country for, being drunk or having alcohol in her system. So you just need to be really careful about the customs, the laws, the culture that you're running into, and you need to understand it's going to be way different than where you're from. Everything will be. So you need to be cautious and you need to pay attention and you need to be informed about what the laws are. So stay up to date on that kind of stuff. So we already did talk a little bit about the passports. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but you also, relatively speaking, need a visa whenever you enter into another country. Now, Americans get a lot of, visa-free access to places, but make sure that you're looking up whatever country you're moving to. Do I need a visa? And if I need a visa, do I need to apply for that visa before I go to the country, or can I apply for it at the border? What is the difference between those options? Okay, so make sure you are aware of that. You might need a visa placed into your passport. It's basically like a stamp that says you have permission to enter that country. One of the last things you might want to think about is the language barrier that you're going to face. Okay, you can't fly into Colombia and think that everyone's going to speak English with you. It's not going to happen. Okay, now I know a lot of Americans are going to talk to non-English speakers inside of America like, learn English, you dumbass. Okay, you moron. You try going to another country and learning another language and tell me how well that goes for you. And tell me how nice it feels to have someone say, Oye, ¿por qué no puedes hablar español muy bien? Chica tu madre. Yeah, okay, so anyway, That was a stupid rant. Yeah, so just, you got to get on the language, okay? Start picking up the language of the locals. They'll really appreciate that you even put in a little bit of effort at it. Even if you are just terrible and suck, they will love that you are just even trying their language. A few ways to get started before you start traveling is with Babbel, Rosetta Stone, Rocket Languages, Duolingo, and I'll throw some links down into the description box for some of those programs. I have a few discount codes for Babbel and things like that. So check those out if you want to. There are some free YouTube channels that will try to teach you to speak the language as well. I don't really recommend any of these ways as your primary form of learning a second language. It's just not going to work that well. Even if you use one of these programs like Babbel or Rosetta Stone or something like that, the language that you learn within one of these programs is not going to be exactly how the language is spoken in the other country. So you might be able to pick up on Latin American Spanish in Rosetta Stone, but once you get down to the individual countries, you're going to realize that they have different phrases and slangs and way to pronounce things, and it just gets very confusing in that sense. So, my Spanish is pretty good, but I swear there's some times where I can just cross a border from like Costa Rica to Nicaragua and I can't understand the difference in the accents, even though they're like incredibly close. So it's just, the best way I think you can learn to language is, yes, maybe get started on one of those programs that I mentioned, but the best way to learn it is just to go to the country and start practicing it as much as you can every single day. Pretend you're a baby. You have to pantomime. You have to use silly words that you know aren't correct, but are as close as they're going to get you. You just have to drop your shame and just practice, and eventually your language will improve.
Way you're talking, it's a cheap disguise.
And the final part of the preparatory stage is getting your insurance. So I usually use either Travelex or World Nomads. I will link down in the description box to things like this. But you don't always necessarily need travel insurance because a lot of the local health insurance could be possible if you gain residency or something like that. For example, if you get to become a temporary resident in Mexico like I am, you could apply for their public health options. But again, there are also private insurance options if you want to go that way. Finally, when it comes to health and insurance, just realize that the cost of healthcare in other countries is not like in the USA. It's not exorbitant and it's not going to bankrupt you. For example, I took my daughter and myself to a Colombian dentist. Mine was the difficult and expensive one, cost $21, and my daughter's cost $15. I had a third-degree sprained ankle in Costa Rica. I needed x-ray, injections, and a doctor visit. That was $100. My daughter was born in Hong Kong. That was completely free, plus a couple days in the ICU. My daughter got sick in Thailand and I took her to the doctor there. It was a $15 doctor visit. So should you have travel insurance? Probably. It covers things like, flights getting delayed and theft and stuff like that. But you don't have to think that you need travel insurance for health costs because you're an American and you think that any car accident will cost you $50,000. No, like I said, I got x-rays, injections, and, taken into the emergency room in Costa Rica, and it cost me $100. So after you've decided where to go during your preparatory stage, then you just need to purchase your tickets, pack your bags, and get moving. But once you arrive, another stage is going to begin. It's the stage where the stress of preparation is quickly washed away by the joy and excitement and the newness of everything, which is then just as quickly replaced by the numerous hurdles of the next stage, the adjustment stage.
I've been working too hard lately. Feel like I'm going crazy.
There are several levels to the adjustment stage. There are some initial adjustments and there are some postponed adjustments. The initial adjustments, I say, are within the first 24 hours. I've already mentioned one, it's the language. You're going to realize it's not exactly the language you learned on the language learning program.
Ooh, Benji, you're so sexy. Give this girl a heart attack. Looking so green these days, but you know that I like that.
Another initial adjustment is the money. I would definitely recommend looking up their money online beforehand just so you have an idea of what to expect, the colors, how many coins they have, what that all counts for. And be careful with your money in the first 24 hours, maybe even the first week or two, because you're going to miscount, and there are definitely taxi drivers and things out there who know that you might miscount and will gladly just try to push you out the door before you have time to even count your change. So just be careful and don't mind being slow. I'll literally sit there and count like $1.50 a change sometimes at the store just because, one, I'm practicing counting their money and I don't know it yet, but two, you just want to make sure that you're not getting ripped off at those small values. So then later on, you're not going to get torn apart on some larger value where you never took the time to learn the coins, and now all of a sudden someone ripped you off of $50 and you didn't even realize it.
Take a look at where you've been and how you've come so far.
Another one of the initial adjustments is going to be the maps and the transport. I would just say get ready to get lost. It's part of the process. It's going to happen. Just remember that every time you get lost, you're building new maps in your brain. And so it might feel a little bit stressful while it's happening, but it's actually good for cognition, and it will help you later on. If you get lost there again, you can think, oh, I remember this place and I know how to get home now. Perfect. So getting lost, not a big deal. You can also get maps and stuff, Google Maps. You can download them onto your phone, so even if you don't have Wi-Fi or internet access, you'll always at least have your maps.
We've been laying here since Saturday.
Now, another thing you're going to have to adjust within the first day or first week or two, actually, is the jet lag. And sooner or later, it's going to hit you depending on how many time zones you've changed. So when I fly to China, actually, I need at least 5 days where I can't even get out of bed. I can only be awake for like 2 or 3 hours at a time because jet lag just rocks me when I go that way. But weirdly, if I fly back from China to the United States, the jet lag is often barely noticeable. I might wake up in the middle of the night and feel alert, but it's not that bad at all.
I've had my heart broken into.
Let's move into a few of the postponed adjustments. Number one is going to be homesickness. Now, a lot of people are going to feel this if you're close with your friends, your family, your routines, your comforts, your foods, your entertainment. All of this stuff can lead to feelings of homesickness. And I get it, man. I've traveled a lot, and there are times where you just think in your head, what am I doing? Why am I in another country right now? I should be back home with family. But I'll tell you, every time I've made the decision to go back home for X, Y, or Z reason, within a month or two, I'm always thinking, I should be out traveling again. I should be gone. Yeah, I don't know why I came back. It was fear or, again, the homesickness, the loneliness, whatever it is. It's something that brings me back, but whenever I get back, I always realize that it's not what I wanted. I wanted to just keep traveling, so you might feel that. I understand. Homesickness isn't easy, but I can guarantee you that it does pass, and it gets less difficult as time goes on. And the loneliness can be hard because there's times where you might be feeling homesickness, so you go out and do something social, and you make some new friends, and it's great, and you can have really close relationships with people, but a lot of them are also travelers. So maybe they're leaving in a few weeks, or maybe they're leaving tomorrow, or maybe they'll stick around for a few months, but then they'll leave, So you might actually have like a small social group for a while, but then it can eventually be ripped apart, and that can be really sad. There is loneliness, but I guarantee you can make friends too if you're even the slightest bit social. So you will feel lonely sometimes, but you will also make a lot of good friends. I promise you that.
You and I could chase forever.
Probably the most difficult adjustment stage that I want to talk about is, I probably made up this term, but I called it the delayed onset recognition of your unhappiness. Now, that is a mouthful, but basically what it means is that your location won't change how you feel inside for very long. So if you're sad before you leave and you don't feel good about your life before you leave, it doesn't matter where you land. You will get like a boost in spirits short term, but eventually you're going to get that delayed onset recognition of your unhappiness again. And I have very personal experience with this. I spent about 1.5 years, almost 2 years in Hong Kong. Now for me, it's really difficult living in Hong Kong because it's very loud, it's very congested. I get sick every 2 months there, because of my lung problems and stuff. And so it's not great for me to live in Hong Kong. My daughter has a lot of family there, a lot of friends, so obviously we do it. But the last time I left Hong Kong was feeling really congested and really crappy and just sick all the time. We went to Thailand, to one of my favorite places, an island down there. And I ended up even finding a house that I had seen a couple years before that I really wanted to live in, and I got to live in it. And then within a few weeks, I realized, I don't feel much different here in Thailand than I did in Hong Kong. Like, yes, I enjoyed the outdoors, the fresh air, living near the beach, the better food, not so many artificial sounds, metal clanking and stuff like that, and buzzsaws. But I still had the same level of internal happiness in Hong Kong that I had in Thailand. And that was a big moment for me because I realized, oh, crap, I guess this is my moment where I realize it doesn't matter where you are, your happiness follows you. That was huge for me. And, I still love Thailand, but it taught me a lot. It taught me that your happiness derives from what you do and who you are, not where you are at. And so some of these initial adjustments, they seem like giant hurdles, and the postponed adjustments can be extremely overwhelming, especially like I said, when I had that recognition that living in Thailand wasn't what was going to make me happy, that took me to a new level of depression because I had been under the assumption that traveling was going to make me happy in and of itself, but it's just not true. Now, granted, that may all be valid. However, over time, those initial adjustments become ripples, and these postponed adjustments kind of fade into the background as you figure out yourself. Now I'm at the point where previously I had never wanted to return to the United States because I didn't like living here, and now I knew before I returned here that I would be fine coming here because I'm just much more at peace with myself, and I have that firm understanding of my location isn't as important to my happiness as how I approach life. So while your location becomes a part of you, it's much more about your perspective and how you approach your situation that is going to give you true satisfaction in your life. So let's go into the last part of this, and this would be the inertia stage.
This ain't what you want. I've been living out hotels for a month.
This would be when your travel starts to pick up momentum and rhythm. And one of the things I would say right away is avoid travel ghosts. What are travel ghosts? Well, like I said, I moved back to somewhere in Thailand that I really loved, but I didn't find the happiness that I had previously felt there. And that's because that happiness had been deriven from the newness of the situation and how much I enjoyed it. And so I decided to fly back to that same exact location and found nothing but a travel ghost. That is the idea that it was going to be a lot like it was before, but it's not. It's a new time. I'm a new me. It was an entirely different situation. And so don't chase travel ghosts. If you found somewhere you love, it might still be nice to go back to that place, but it's not going to be exactly what it was before. I promise you that. So those are the travel ghosts. Avoid them. Now let's talk about a few of the ways to travel full time.
Darling, only you can set your spirit free.
The first way is through continuous travel. These are usually single people. They can keep moving. They never stay in one place for too long. They might take inexpensive transport from hostel to hostel, for example. And so they're just spending as little money as they can and just extending their travels as long as possible. So this continuous travel, like I said, usually for people who are very flexible, generally young single people.
You don't have to wait on me.
Another way to travel is serendipitous travel. Now, I think this is one of the most interesting ways to travel, and it's kind of the principle of Wu Wei. If you haven't heard of this, it's a Chinese principle, which is you kind of go with the flow of life. If you're a surfer, you know that you don't just paddle into any wave. You wait for the right wave, the right time, the right spot. It's the same thing with your travels. As life goes, follow it. You might end up in the back of a small pickup truck, traveling to some far-off coast with newfound friends, or you might hunker down on an eco-farm for a few months, learning about permaculture farming and how locals manage to rely on themselves and their neighbors for all their needs. So this serendipitous form of travel really lets you just go where the times are taking you, and I guarantee you will learn something and find beautiful places. I think it's one of the most interesting ways to travel. However, that's not how I travel now.
While they were waiting on the right time, you went and made your wave.
Generally, what I'm doing is using slow travel because I have a child, and this is just the best way to extend our visas and make sure everything is as cost effective as possible. So, for example, we can get a 3-month or 6-month visa somewhere. Then we will stay there for as long as permitted. We will find, that we have to take fewer flights, fewer buses, fewer taxis, things like that can really add up in costs over time. We don't have to waste time moving around, packing and unpacking, figuring out logistics, settling in, things like that. And it gives us time to really live like a local and reduce our costs. That is, we can learn the language and build relationships with business owners in the area. We can find the least expensive food stands. We can find all the produce carts and things like that. So I would say that this slow travel really gives you the best way to keep your costs low and really dive into the culture wherever you are at.
Because I have a home, somewhere to run to.
Another thing you might consider is having like a headquarters in America. So if you have a home in the United States already or wherever you're from, just keep it as your headquarters. You could keep it vacant and return to it whenever you want. You could also use it as a house sitting feature or a home swap. Say someone from Italy wants to come to the United States at the same time you want to go to Italy, hit them up. You can switch houses. They take yours, you take theirs for a month, whatever. You could also just rent it out as additional income when you're not living there. So if you have a headquarters in the United States, you're in a pretty good position, I would say.
Shake up all the rules, pretend like they were never made.
And the last way that you can really travel, I would say, there's another channel on YouTube here called NOMAD Capitalist, and Andrew Henderson on there talks a lot about the trifecta lifestyle. Now that is about having like 3 places that you really love to live. You set up your own little home base there, and from there you can explore. So for example, you could buy a home in the countryside of Colombia outside your favorite major city, and then have a tiny casita in a Mexico surfing village, and then an apartment in Tbilisi, Georgia for summer vacations in Europe. And if you own those 3 locations, you can easily travel between them. And then say from Tbilisi, Georgia, you can explore more of Europe. From your place in Colombia, you can explore all of South America. From your place in Mexico, you can explore all of Central America and make it back to the United States if you have to, etc. So that's the trifecta idea in a nutshell. So if you're feeling perpetually stressed, upset with your current environment, or disillusioned with the government, I can't recommend enough that you give long-term travel a try. You decide your life, you decide your cost of living, you decide what you do, where you go, and what to spend your time on. The more you focus on yourself, the less you'll concern yourself with the problems of the States or wherever you're from, and you'll find yourself able to live better worldwide. If you haven't seen the first episode of the Live Better Worldwide podcast yet, please check out this video right here. Don't forget to subscribe before you go, and I will see you next time. Peace.